I remember Deus Ex as a game I had trouble with when I was younger. I was introduced to it by a friend because I had just started getting into PC gaming, and up until that point, consoles were the way to go for me. The concept was thrilling. The idea that I could be dropped into the middle of this big open level, and I could complete that level taking any one of numerous routes, completing objectives using different skills, this was an entirely new concept for me. Well, okay, hang on. Let's rewind a bit. Memory is a faulty thing, especially when you're living with rose-tinted glasses permanently sewn into your face holes. Thief the Dark Project was actually the first of this kind of game I had ever played. See, I didn't know what to think of this game at first. To be honest, Thief was sort of boring for me at first. I was definitely not the type of guy to be sitting in a corner waiting for a guard to turn away before crossing. I was not patient, and Thief is, well, it's really all about patience, planning, and timing. I didn't really appreciate that game properly. That is until I got to the chapel. You know the place. The one that made your skin crawl. The game was so much more than the sum of its parts, and from that moment forward, I wanted to play nothing but that game. I wanted to play on every difficulty, find every hidden item, read every piece of lore strewn about the levels. Thief had me by the short hairs. So you can imagine how excited I was when I found out that Warren Spector was working on a new game. According to IGN, everyone's favorite source of gaming news, Warren said of his time with the Thief team that team was adamant about focusing on stealth to the exclusion of everything else. A lot of the reason why Deus Ex even exists is because of the stubbornness, the appropriate stubbornness, of the Thief team, end quote. Warren went on to talk about the moment that inspired him to pursue another project. He said that there was this moment in Thief where he just wasn't good enough to sneak past the guard. So he went to the team and asked them if they could make the player character stronger. The team responded appropriately enough that if they were to make the player stronger, there would be no reason to sneak. The game, from top to bottom, was designed with that one mechanic, that one gameplay loop of stealth in mind. To make the player stronger would have unbalanced the whole cart. He said, and I quote, "I was going to build another team to do that, and that's one of the reasons Deus Ex exists. Out of my frustration with this genius team of people I love who made Thief." End quote. In other interviews, Warren's departure seems less about vision and more about survival. In an interview at 2017 GDC, Warren says, and I quote, "Looking Glass ran out of money, let's be frank," and described the financial situation as akin to panhandling. Warren Spector is an RPG veteran. Early in his career, he got to work with TSR, who were the original creators of such tabletop games like Dungeons & Dragons, Spelljammer, and Planescape, though Spector worked on other games like Top Secret SI and the Marvel Superheroes RPG as well. He then went on to work with Origin, the developers of the beloved RPG classic Ultima. He was also a co-producer of Ultima 6 and Wing Commander, and produced Ultima Underworld, which is often cited as the inspiration for Thief, and is often cited as one of the first and most influential immersive sims. Warren Spector was building up a preference for these types of games he liked to make. Choice was the order of the day, it seemed, and after a short stint working on Thief, Warren left the team and almost signed a contract with Electronic Arts to make what was then an unannounced RTS project that was rumored to be a new Command & Conquer game. He originally pitched an idea to EA and Origin called Troubleshooter, an action RPG starring a hard-boiled 90s-era CIA operative named Jake Shooter. Good thing his ideas had some time to percolate, as both EA and Origin turned down the project, most likely due to the scope and budget a project of that size would have entailed. Then Ion Storm founder John Romero called Spector and said, "Don't sign that contract. Join Ion Storm and make the game of your dreams." Who could have possibly said no to that? Now, I've talked a lot in the past about open world games and their monumental lack of focus at times, so I want to look at what Deus Ex did and continues to do what most sandbox games fail to do. So let's dig in, shall we? Installing the game was more of a problem than it should have been. See, I was playing with the revision of Deus Ex and it was running well, but when I had to minimize the start OBS, the game crashed. The game would no longer start after this and failed with a locked file error. I uninstalled the game and reinstalled and got the same locked file error. Turns out I had to obliterate the install completely, erase it from my hard drive like a bad memory of an inappropriate uncle. I reinstalled the vanilla Deus Ex experience and found something interesting. Revision wasn't just a retexture or a model overhaul, the geometry of the level was actually changed. I decided at that point that Revision wasn't the version I was going to use to explore the design of this game, since its original design had been changed. But as I played, I found the game unplayable. Weapons didn't switch, cutscenes would often cut the dialogue off, enemy AI was broken and no longer followed their pathing. I did another clean wipe and invalidated the files. 2 corrupt files. After the files were fixed, I booted the game up and prayed. I heard that low hum of the synth music growling up and the logo comes swinging in, and as the cutscene played, it skipped. But it worked, so I started the first level. So before we start this whole thing, I want to start off with laying out a few definitions. An obstruction can be one of many things. Usually they fall into a few categories. Number 1, we got a human obstruction. A human obstruction is usually varied with how they could be overcome. For instance, human obstructions can be someone you need to get info from, someone you need to kill or sneak past, or even in some games, made into a boring escort mission. 2, a physical barrier to progress. A barrier to progress is usually something like a locked door, a laser grid, or even a booby trap. A barrier can be bypassed in many ways depending on the preference of the player and the tools available to them, but there is almost always a route B into an area, at least in Deus Ex. 3, a technological obstruction. A tech obstruction is usually something like a camera system, control panel, computer, turret, etc. These security features can be avoided or hacked. They can also be outright destroyed. The thing that all these obstructions have in common is that they are choices that the player must make, and as we will discuss with the character creation screen and the second weapon choice, every decision a player makes matters. If a player starts this opening level with a build and decides they don't like playing that way, chances are they'll abandon this style for something that suits their tastes. That is the power of the immersive sim and its design. It gives the player the ability to express themselves in their own unique way without putting up roadblocks that are unpassable unless certain conditions are met. Now let's talk about choice. The first choice we're given is in the skills that we will initially invest in. These skills are often touted as some of the best examples of useful skills in video games. Literally no skill is totally worthless save for maybe swimming and environmental. And others don't become worthless until very late in the game, but for the most part, every level makes great use of these skills as there is almost always a way to bypass an obstacle using them. For instance, on top of the enemy dispensing skills like martial arts, small arms, rifles, demolition, there are utility skills which facilitate your opening of locks, hacking consoles, rerouting wiring, etc. to do a variety of things in game, which opens up shortcuts, avoids hazards, bypassing cameras to allow more reliable sneaking, or turning off various security measures. These skills are important as the difficulty and skill needed to do specific playthrough varies, and not investing in combat skills leaves you extremely vulnerable to attack without an effective means to defend yourself. All the vulnerability of Thief with the utility of a spy. The skill selection screen is a way for the player to choose their own difficulty. The next choice you are given is a second choice of weapon. These weapons are more than just a perk. They are physical representations of 3 different playstyles. The crossbow with its ability to put people to sleep with a single headshot, with the option for deadlier ammo, represents the careful sneak. This weapon can make many areas in the opening level much easier, and can be a must-have when suppressing resistance in a heavily populated area. The Gep gun represents the Technomancer style of play, focusing on destroying or incapacitating heavy armor and hacking to progress your way through a level. There are many ways and opportunities in just the first level alone to use this weapon, and some opportunities make the entire opening level of the game a joke to progress through. And a sniper rifle represents the one-man army, going in loud and suppressing resistance with an arsenal of weapons. You'll know which style you fall into, and it is quite possible to mix and match these playstyles, but each style has its own path forward. The level design is key, however, in this style of design success or failure, so let's look at the first level. When you walk into the main courtyard after your brother gives you your second weapon, you'll see a pillar of brick. The simple square would look out of place in a real world, but in game it acts as a barrier between us and the enemy. If you imagine this level without this obstruction, the enemy placements would have to be changed, just like they were in Revision, and in my opinion, it's the wrong move. My reasoning is this. This area is the first challenge area. The player must at this juncture make yet another decision. Do I attack the 2 patrolling guards, or do I wait until they've turned around to walk away? If I choose to attack them, I have several ways to do this. If I choose the crossbow, I could wait until they separate, and make them forget 30 minutes of their lives with a well-placed tranquilizer to the head. I could take out my shoulder-mounted rocket launcher and blow them into tiny bits, or I could just run up shooting and pile up the body count. Within those 3 choices, and several possibilities, due to sometimes random behavior the AI exhibits when their scripting is thrown into disarray. I can't think of a time when the AI did the same thing twice. The difficulty of the levels is compounded by the fact that the items are limited. You can't buy ammo like in other games from stores in bulk, though you can buy a clip from some people. The total amount of ammo you find in the level just isn't enough to kill everything in it unless you're very careful and very accurate. To do that, you would have to use all of your ammo and get the rest done through melee combat unless you chose certain dialogue choices and choose your aim carefully. Barring that, if you don't explore, you could end up running out of bullets, which means having to use crossbow bolts to put people to sleep. Which also means that you'll have to watch the enemy run around screaming for several seconds while they quote-unquote fall asleep. For this video, I tested two people who have never played any Deus Ex game before, and I found that on both occasions, both participants took the crossbow, believing it to be the safest bet. And when they used it to put someone to sleep, they found that it didn't work the way they thought it would. Which makes sense. The guards, when shot with a tranq dart, immediately turn and start shooting you. People expected them to at least react to the sensation first. See, most people associate getting shot with a tranq dart like getting stuck with a needle. We would have to at least see what we've been shot with before we turn to look for who shot them. The other issue is that the enemy automatically knows where we are and starts shooting us. As players now, people at least expect to have to be discovered before someone starts shooting in random directions. In a game of this tone, we tend to require a bit more of a simulation than an action game. If we get the jump on an enemy, we have come to expect a certain result. For me, I can't think of a game that had done this before Thief. Hitting someone from behind with a club or a sword or a carefully placed arrow almost always resulted in a one-hit incapacitation. In Deus Ex, it causes a minor annoyance, except if you use a gun. See, a gun appears to be a one-hit kill if you get a headshot, but with the addition of a shrinking crosshair, appears to overwhelm the two participants. It appears that players want to start stealthy, but when they try it and it turns out to not be all that stealthy, they quickly give up on the crossbow and go to the gun. The game also does a terrible job onboarding the participant. If it was often cited in the study that the participants felt that they would have done better if they knew more about how to control the game. One participant said that they liked that they had thrown them into a game the way that they did because it didn't hold his hand like a tutorial, but then later complained that he didn't know how to hack panels and this caused him to be discovered, and that if he knew more about the game, he would have liked it better. The second participant said that she was frustrated because nothing seemed to operate the way she expected, and if she was thrown into a tutorial first, she would have at least known what to expect to happen when things got serious. So it looks like both camps are looking for the same thing, but presented in different ways. This is why the super easy tutorial level has become such a mainstay in new games. It gives the player the chance to test out their skills, without any serious consequences. It feels more fair to the player if they are given the information and some time to practice it before the game expects anything of them. The problem comes in from the fact that the opening level is setting expectations. When the opening of your game is a walkthrough, then you can't suddenly ramp the difficulty in the next level up by a ratio of 10. Expectations must be kept, and therefore, only incremental changes in difficulty can be made. Just look at Arkham Asylum for a great example of ramping difficulty by introducing new inmates with new skills incrementally. If a game starts out very difficult in the first level, the player will succeed once they die early on, and their expectations are immediately set. They know now that they must be careful. The first level of a game sets the tone. Let's use a boxing analogy. If you fight like Mayweather, the game will dance around a bit, learn your patterns, then later in the 5th level or so, it'll take the training wheels off and start batting you around. In the first level, it's more like Conor McGregor. I'll try to kill you in the first round and give up sometime around level 3 and kick you in the head. The point is, the opening level is incredibly important. So let's look at Ellis Island. The first thing we see when we are leaving the dock is a column of brick. On both sides is a patrol coming right for the player, and if the timing is right, the player will see them coming before they see him. This cannot always be guaranteed, however, and some players fail at the point before they even know the rules of the game, like distance and viewing angles of the AI. Some games fix this issue visually, with a radar or detective sight. None of these solutions are elegant outside of their original purpose. For instance, detective sight works for Batman because we believe he'd have something like that, but in a game like Shadows and Mordor, it seems like a contrivance. Still, there are some very good design choices in this level. For instance, When you come to the entrance, you can quite literally see the first of two paths that are available for the player to pursue. In my testing, both participants went straight ahead. It seems that when you open a level and show the player a direction they can go first, they tend to go to the first direction they see. It was likely designed this way so that the player would see the UNATCO building first, talk to the guard out front, and get the stockpile of ammo for their pistol, as well as some extra goodies that will come in handy later. Now, notice that the boxes arrayed in this long path are mostly along the wall near the UNATCO building. By contrast, the other side seems barren and full of guards patrolling the area. If the player exits the UNATCO building and walks into this area, they'll see the overwhelming odds ahead and the close and comfortable boxes nearby, and will, in interest of self-preservation, most likely stick to this cover since the main road is being patrolled by two guards. The reason we go this way is twofold. First, it is visually interesting. It's better lit, less exposed, and leads to 2 points of interest, one of which we instinctively know will offer us ammo, of which we are seriously low on. Once the player has gotten to the area near the turret patrol, another obstacle is erected. Every choice matters in level design, but it seems more relevant when you have a specific overall vision for your game. For instance, take this area of the level. This area operates in several ways, offering the player a variety of routes to enter the door. First is an obstacle. This obstacle is designed in a way as to facilitate the creativity of the player and how they decide to tackle a given situation. Take the movement of the tank. It takes a specific and predictable route along the set of walls to an intersection where a small building obstructs the view from the angle which the player will more than likely be approaching from first. The level designer has put this entrance close enough to the player that it is likely that he or she will come to it first. It also obstructs the vehicle's view and gives the player a visible route to sneak into the building. If we were to say make the turret stationary, then there would only be one way to get into the front door, and that would be to use force. As it stands, the act of making the turret move around on the map gives the player the option to sneak in. It's up to the player whether or not they engage. This also enforces the decisions made at the beginning of the game. If a player knows the map and is on a second playthrough, they may choose the GEP gun just so they can make quick work of the first level. If you don't choose the GEP gun, the genius of putting the turret on tracks is that you are saying to the player, go in whatever entrance you want. If you don't want to blow the turret up and you spent no points on hacking to turn off the camera, you can just go around them to another entrance somewhere on the island. And this is another point that goes to the level design. The whole level is circular. You can follow the main road and end up right back at the beginning, which ensures in a way that the player could quite possibly see everything the map has to offer instead of a complex maze of tunnels that you'll get lost in. Let's look at yet another great example of a multiple path objective contained in a tiny room. This is a sort of vertical slice of the game's entire gameplay loop. To understand a vertical slice is to understand the core of what makes a level's design good or what makes it fail. The most memorable moments of games for me are moments that are designed to take all of the player's tools into account to facilitate the gameplay in an encounter. An encounter is when the exploration of a level stops and an obstacle is erected blocking the player's progress. In Deus Ex, there is a side room that is essentially a vertical slice of almost everything that Deus Ex has available. It's appropriate then that this area can be found in the very first level of gameplay. In a garage area near the back entrance of the Statue of Liberty, there is an area that shows nearly 4 different ways to approach a situation. First, there is an enemy in the area. This patrol route is very simple, and this may very well be the very first enemy a player needs to deal with if they have been using stealth to get here. So the encounter is very simple because of this. He is easily dispatched, but further inside are some items that are being blocked by a harmful looking electric arc from what looks like might have been a forklift accident. There are a couple different ways to deal with this. First, if the player sees the ladder walking in on top of the shipping crate or whatever that's supposed to be, there's a multi-tool. Since the player found this tool in the same room as an accident, they may be inclined to use it on the electrical panel. This is one way to solve the issue, and the other is to raise the forklift, jump on the forks, and walk over the box. See, they designed it this way because they wanted to let you know without telling you explicitly that these tools are used on this item to fix these problems. If the player does not bring a box with them onto the other side and destroys the other boxes on the other side and somehow misses the metal box that's in between the wall and the whatever that is, shipping crate, they will have no choice but to get electrocuted. There's also a red herring in the room. The hazmat suit gives the player the impression that it might help protect them, but they would be wrong. See, the suit does not, in my testing, appear to provide any protection in any meaningful way from the electricity. This room teaches the player what multi-tools are for, and how those skills can be opened up to rewards. It's a great teaching moment that may change the way a player plays the game midstream. It also tells the player that it is a good idea to explore the level and that they'll be rewarded for it. By exploring, the player will find multiple entrances to areas and perhaps even an easier route to the end of the level. The point is, there's always at least 2 ways to approach a major obstruction in this level, and it is where the game succeeds most in the immersive sim department. See, the level, its layout, the multiple paths, and all the various obstructions are what present the player with options and force them to make decisions. The back entrance
Giggity giggity, giggity goo.
is the navigation and jumping tutorial of the game. We learn how to use a ladder, we learn how to use boxes to bridge gaps, and we learn the distance our awkward jump will take us. Once we get to the top of the pyramid of boxes, we are given yet another choice. This time, the option we see in front of us does not immediately look safest. In fact, the area to the left of the ladder you come up on looks a lot safer due to the wider availability of cover to hide behind. The path ahead, by contrast, has very little, but has only one guard. It is also the shortest path to the steps, which we don't have eyes on yet. Once again, the level designer is showing you the best path, but making you make a choice. Do I take the more dangerous looking path or the safer, probably longer route? Once we get up the stairs, we find all entrances have an obstruction in them. We are on to our next encounter. If we circle around the left, we will find 2 guards, too close to take down reliably. We could toss in a gas grenade and pop them in the head, or we could go back the other way, but we would soon find out that the other ways in are blocked by gas grenades as well. But directly across from the goons, there is a long open shot that a sniper rifle can take and more than likely get 2 easy kills and an entrance into the tower. This is also a way that the level designer made an item useful. See, an item in a game isn't automatically useful just because it exists. The level and the design of that level have to facilitate gameplay with that item. The way an encounter is designed is that a small area is relatively cut off from other connective areas of the game. Take the front entrance, for example. Notice that there are walls with obstructions cutting off view of other areas. That is because the designer did not want the player to have to worry too much about anything other than the encountered objects in that area, which are the camera, the control panel, the moving turret, the guard, and the safe space. Notice the patrol route. Notice that it wraps around the safe space, but none of the obstructions enter the building. This gives the player a place to hide. If an enemy was hiding inside this building, we might feel that it's unfair because the building is there to tell the player, hide inside of me. If the player is punished for that, the player will start to no longer trust the design of the level. They might start thinking that this is an ambush kind of game and there's going to be one around every corner, and the game becomes a lot like Dark Souls. This is a place where the player can watch the patrols go by, get their timing, and follow the robot to the boxes and hack the control panel, or continue onto the docks to get the key if they cannot hack the unlocked doors later. Or they can throw up their hands and get gun the whole place and go in through the back. This is the difference between a sandbox and an open world. Open worlds live and breathe on their own. Apart from story missions where the AI can be more scripted, a sandbox, or immersive sim, as some have taken to calling it, has designed encounters which test the player's decision-making skills and their creativity. Now imagine what would happen if there were waypoints in this game. The player would know without exploring what the best way into the place would be. They would know that there was a back entrance and that this would be the easiest way in, and the majority of players would take that route around, completely bypassing about 50% of the level. Sometimes people tell me that they don't understand why I like a certain kind of game and why I don't, and this is why. I prefer that a level be small and well designed, instead of scattershot, unpredictable, and large, littered with mindless things to do. Smaller, denser levels with deliberate design make the player think before taking an action. I had noticed in my study with the 2 players that I tested this on that they were taking their time. They had to stop to think about what they were going to do because the story thus far has sold us on the fact that combat is dangerous and we are just a squishy human and who can die very easily. I see them stopping for long periods of time in the video that I took to take in an area and plan their route of attack. The level design inspires that. The fact that you can die easily and that at the same time there is so much cover and so few enemies that there should be no excuse for you to die, makes the player take the more careful approach, be that with bullets, darts, or rockets to the face. This is the strength of the level design in Deus Ex.